One of the reasons, there are many, but one of the reasons the Disneyland Railroad is still running after so many years, outlasting many of the other real railroads out there, and I'm talking specifically about the train themselves, is that they're very well maintained. Yes, it's helpful to have one of the biggest and most powerful corporation in the world to bankroll your railroad, but I'm talking about maintenance specifically. They can actually afford and do rebuilds. These engines, as you know, are actually quite old. The newest ones are actually number 1 and 2, built in 54 or so for the park. The other engines, number 3, number 4, and number 5, were plantation engines from around 1900. So the newest engines are in fact now approaching 75 years old, and the other ones are well over 100, and they're still going. Rebuilds are when they take an engine out of the park to a locomotive shop and literally take it apart. They'll inspect each component, either refurb it or make a new one to replace it. Main items receiving the most attention are usually the boiler, the plumbing, the frame, and the running gear. Sometimes even the cab will get a rebuilt since it is made of wood and may rot after so many years. So yeah, in fact, the number 1 and number 2 engines you see at the park today really bears little resemblance to the original ones when Walt was around. It sort of raised up the question of the ship of the Aces, which is about whether once all of the components has been replaced, is it still the same ship? But anyway, the point is that even here at the Highball Sim, I also thought if rebuilding the engines would be feasible and even beneficial. The sim is, after all, almost 6 years old now, and what if we were to rebuild it using modern tools? Computer tools, of course. So earlier, I started a new build, and I thought now is a good time to share it with you. If you'd like to take a look, we can just head down the hill, down the trail here. The workshop is just around the corner. So let's grab our cup of coffee or whatever drink you prefer, and we'll take a short walk down. If you're wondering where we are, by the way, welcome to the new home of Highball Sim. We're here at the ranch, and we have here a little outpost. Yes, it is styled very heavily after a certain shack found in a certain swamp of a certain bluish color with some western flair added. The locomotive shop is just down the trail from here. You should know at this point the engine is still very bare bone. Uh, there's only the frames there right now, but I thought it was a good time to share it with you because it's already starting to look like our engine number 1. Please excuse all the mess around here. This is, after all, a active production site. But here we are at the shop, and we have the rebuild in progress here for our engine number 1. Let's have a look around the engine first, and then we can go closer in to see all the components. Obviously, there's no boiler yet, but one of the advantages of this stage of construction is that you can see right down between the frames and see all the running gears. As I said, this is a rebuild. Every piece and component is being remade and retextured. You should know at this point this is still a static model. It does not move. That will be a different challenge later on. Getting the engine coded and rigged and animated. But for now, we have this static model of the frame that will be the basis of our rebuild. So let's take a closer look just by way of getting a quick tour of the different components here. We have, of course, right at the front, the pilot. And in the middle pilot, we have the coupler pocket here. Also, as it is rebuilt with modern modeling tools, the geometry fidelity is much better than what we have in the current version of the sim. The pilot here is supported by the 2 tension rods on the side because of the length of the pilot. We have nice and shiny cylinders, and right below it are the pilot wheels. And we can even go right and try to see the pilot truck. You can see the springs and the bolts and the pins that hold the pilot truck together. The pilot wheels are of course embossed with the word Disneyland. Notable because it's set in 2 words, Disney and land. Right after the cylinders, we have of course the crosshead and the guides. Mounted on top of the crosshead guys here, these little brass cups, they're the grease cups. They hold lubricating oil so that when the crosshead travel back and forth, it picks up a little bit of grease. Here we can even open them up. Of course, there's nothing in there right now, but that is how you would add oil to it. Between the frames here is one of the air tank, and it is also hooked up to a safety valve. That's the bronze color cylinder you see sticking out on the side. The plumbing, of course, is not finished yet, but there's a little stuff out there on top. And right here is where you can see more of the pilot truck. You can see the axle here, the silver chrome axle, and it bears on this brass device. That's the wearing surface. Back here, this is the rocker. It's controlled by the link, which is this semicircular back here right below the frame. It's driven by the eccentrics. So as the front driver rotates, the eccentrics will also rotate. And on the eccentric here is this grayish color piece of metal. It's bolted to the axle. On the eccentric rides this darker painted black color metal. That's the strap, and the strap goes out to the link, and as the motion of, or as the driver rotates forward, the motion creates this back and forth motion, which is why this piece here is called the rocker. On top of the rocker, there's also another lubricating cup. A Lukenheimer has two different types of lubricator with a T-shaped handle on top. One such lubricator is that you turn and screw down the handle to force the oil from the reservoir into the shaft here. The other one is a plunger type. I believe the ones on number 1 and 2 is a plunger type. So you can come here and you could push down the plunger like so and force the lubrication down into the shaft. But normally you do not need to do this, because as the rocker rotates back and forth, it picks up a little bit of oil. But this is one of the ways that you could force lubrication in the shaft. We're back now at the front driver. You could even see the outline of the axle. We have the hub. The rods have been rebuilt with more detail. You can see all the bolts and the screws and the brass wearing devices on the rod. The famous and distinguished stars on the driver hubs, and the pilot wheels are already in. I wasn't gonna have these done for the video, but I did manage to get them in there last minute, and I think they actually add a lot to the engine. Just by putting the stars on the wheels, it really does start to look like the Disneyland Railroad engine very quickly. Between the drivers, we have the air brake cylinder. Below it, there will be a piston actuated to the brake shoes on each driver. Right above it, this is the spring equalizing bar. And because we don't have the boiler in here, we can actually come in and take a look between the frames or behind the frame to see how it works. The drivers, I guess it's easier to see on the back one because the eccentrics are in the way. But the axle, just like the pilot, rides on the brass inside this axle box. The axle box can move up and down within this jaw, the space in the frame, and it's supported and resisted by the saddle, and which in turn is supported by this leaf spring. You can see the hangers. The hanger supporting the spring, and the equalizing bar taking the weight right to the middle of the frame here. This plate here, this will be the cab floor. There is something very much missing on this cab floor. Can you tell me what it is? If so, put it right there in a comment. But it's a subtle detail, but it's definitely missing. Of course, it is all in progress here, but just want to get your thoughts. The housing bracket in the back here, this of course supports the back end of the running board and the cab. Right about here is where the engineer would sit. So this would be the point of view. Right on the other side would be the fireman. Underneath the cab is the other air tank. The air tank is hooked up to this drain valve, which we can also operate. This lets out any condensate, any water condensate out of the air tank. One of my wish lists from the first sim, the current sim, if you remember, or if you watch from that video, is that I wish that the engine in that sim you could walk up and actually inspect all these bolts and components, and in this one, that is one of the goal, and I think you can see that we can walk right up to it. You can even see the pins on the bolts on the components that rotate. Here's then a plunger lubricator on top of the rocker. And the other set of crosshead lubricator. Right below that is the other drain for the front air tank. If you notice that the rear air tank does not have a safety valve, and that is because the front and the rear tank are hooked up together, so they share the same pressure. This is a wire on the crosshead, and that just keep the bolt from rotating out of position. This is the leaf spring on the pilot. It's hidden behind its own equalizing bar. This bronze device in front of the rectangular steam chest are the release valve, so that when the drivers or when the train is moving with the piston moving inside, because it's driven or it's linked to the drivers, this will suck in air so that the movement of the piston does not suck in air through the smokestack and cool down the boiler. On top of the steam chest are also lubricator cups, but these are actually fake ones. One of the very few components on the engine that's actually fake. That's for the look, the correct look of the type of locomotive. The valves are actually lubricated by a mechanical lubricator that would be mounted on this bracket here, driven by the motion of the rocker and the and this rod that drives the valve slide motion. And we're back at the front. So that's the tour of the frame so far. Let me know what you think. If you'd like to see this build keep going, and yeah, I don't know if this will be a full rebuild yet. Like I said, we're using new tools. A new engine comes with its own challenges. Um, I will have to see if it is possible to get the coding the of this engine. If it's possible to support those kind of behavior and physics. One of the challenges coming up next will be getting all these parts animated and move as they should. But that is about it for today. And as always, highball!